Hey everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Got another great show for you here tonight. Before we get going, as always, chime in and let me know where you're tuning in from and say hello. And if you don't mind, throw out a heart, throw out a like, throw out a love, and give me a hashtag, save 100 million lives. Tonight we're going to be talking about nutritional myths. This is a big show. I picked 7 really great myths to kind of debunk this evening. And so as we go through this, if you're wanting to understand a little bit more about weight loss, make sure you pay attention to the very end, because I've got a really big myth that I'm going to bust on weight loss plateaus. So those of you who've ever, in weight gain too, those of you who've ever struggled either trying to put weight on or trying to take weight off, there's some really huge myths around that topic, and I will be covering that topic tonight. So make sure you tune in, because it's going to be the last one that we cover. So let's dive into nutritional myths. Okay. So, who do you believe? There's so much misinformation that's being propagated both on the internet and magazines, newspapers, even by doctors. I mean, some doctors are some of the worst at kind of promoting some of the biggest myths. And so myth number 1 that I want to talk about is the sugar myth, or really more specifically, it's the fructose myth. Now, how many of you have ever been told that fructose is healthier than regular sugar? Now, if you've been told that, just type in fructose right now. So what we hear often is that fructose, because it comes from fruit, like this is the kind of the mantra, right, is healthier than sugar. Now, first of all, sugar's not good for you. And second of all, fructose is not good for you either. Now, and when I'm saying fructose and sugar, I'm not referring to the fructose that's naturally occurring in fruit. And I'm not talking about sugar that's naturally occurring sugar in fruit and other plant-based foods. I'm talking about the highly refined, highly processed out fructose that is extrapolated out of predominantly corn. If we look at the United States, it's corn fructose, high fructose corn syrup. Okay, so when you look at a food label, one of the things they're trying to do nowadays is they're trying to trick you. Instead of saying corn syrup or high fructose corn syrup, they're now trying to use this natural sweetener. And what does that mean? It comes from nature. Yeah, it sure does. But plutonium also comes from nature, and you don't want to go hang around some radioactive plutonium. My point is, just because it says natural doesn't mean that it's healthy. There are things in nature that are not good for us. Corn syrup is one of them. When we extrapolate out fructose, you have to understand that fructose is not metabolized the same way as sugar. So first of all, in my opinion, it's not healthier than sugar. Sugar's not healthy either. So this is not me saying eat sugar but don't eat fructose. This is me saying you shouldn't really eat either one of these things when they're highly refined. But fructose has to basically, it can't be metabolized like regular sugar. It's got to be metabolized, and it's broken down through the liver. So in my opinion, one of the reasons why we're seeing so many people struggle with metabolic syndrome, and one of the elements in particular with metabolic syndrome, is an elevation in triglycerides. So we're seeing an elevation in triglycerides for many people as a result of the overabundance of fructose being used to sweeten everything from children's cereal to bread, to candy, to chewing gums, to, you name it. There's fructose pretty much in everything that is being sweetened, at least in the United States. And so corn syrup is not better for you, or fructose is not better for you than sugar. So that's myth number 1. So don't fall kind of victim to that mentality that if it's natural because it's fructose, it's somehow better for you. If you see fructose, high fructose corn syrup, or any derivative of those terms, including natural sweetener, ask the question, is this really what I want? Now, on that same note, I forgot to mention something, because it's not always corn syrup, right? Sometimes you'll see a product that is sweetened with concentrated fruit juice, okay? This is going to be super high in fructose, and it's probably not something that you should be consuming on a regular basis either. So where you'll see a lot of this is like your jams or your jellies, things of that nature, where they're trying to use something that's more natural, right? Because a lot of times people skip over sweetened with concentrated apple juice or sweetened with concentrated grape juice. No, that stuff is just as deadly with fructose as corn syrup is, only maybe instead of being genetically modified corn, these other things can sometimes be on the can or on the jar, and they're from an organic fruit. Still highly concentrated in fructose, still not good for you. So keep that in mind. So let's see, number two. Number two, your doctor knows more about nutrition than you do. The average doctor knows less than you do, and this is not an assault or an insult to doctors. It's just a truth. The average doctor, when they go through medical training, has less than 7 hours of nutrition. So nutrition being one of the fundamental sciences of human health, how can we take a doctor who is supposed to understand human health and understand human disease, who takes less than 7 hours of nutrition? Now, you ask a number of doctors and they'll tell you they have even less than that. They didn't actually get 7 hours, or that the nutritional class that they got was 7 hours on. Make sure that that you tell people about calories and don't eat too many calories. Like, it's the type of nutritional training that they get. It's actually quite comical. And so less than 7 hours is bad enough, but less than 7 hours of the type of nutritional training can be even worse. So if you're going to your doctor and you're expecting that the advice that you're going to be getting is sound nutritional information, know that your doctor, unless they have some type of postgraduate training in advanced nutrition, to give you an example of abbreviations or initials to look for, ACBN. If you see this discrimination behind the doctor's name, so DACBN would stand for Diplomate American Clinical Board of Nutrition. This is where I received my postdoctoral training in nutrition, but this is actually the only board certifying agency for the postgraduate level in clinical nutrition that exists. And there are only, maybe 350 in total of doctors with the delineation DACBN. So we're not super common, but there's a minimum for this criteria to have more than 300 hours. So you go from 7 to 300. Well, that's a pretty big discrepancy. That's a pretty big gap. Now add clinic. Tell you, you're not gaining enough weight. And I'm using this as an example. One of the common things I hear doctors say is to get better nutrition in order to grow or to gain weight. It's just bad advice all the way around. So if you're going to your medical doctor to get nutritional advice, unless they have some type of postgraduate training and extensive training at that, then you probably know more about nutrition than they do. And this is really the part that angers me the most is, as a doctor, I'm not an OB-GYN, so I'm not going to do something beyond the scope of my ability to help somebody. And so like doing a gynecological exam would not be something I would make an attempt at doing. No more than a doctor who's not trained in nutrition should make an attempt at giving nutritional advice. It just isn't, it's not a good standard and it's not a good ethic. So if your doctor's divvying out nutritional advice but has that less than 7 hours of training, it's time to really ask deeper questions or find another doctor who has a specialty or subspecialty in nutrition where you can actually get meaningful advice that matters. Because the quantity of people I've seen over the last 20 years in my practice, and I've seen thousands and thousands of cases of autoimmune disease go in remission as a result of diet change, simply diet change. But in all those cases, I've never once seen or heard of a person coming into me after visiting with their rheumatologist or visiting with their endocrinologist say that diet or nutrition had any role to play in their autoimmune condition. So in essence, of all the people I've ever treated, thousands of cases of autoimmune disease that goes away with diet change, none of them were ever told by their other doctors that diet had anything to do with their autoimmune disease. Matter of fact, most of them were told that diet had nothing to do with their autoimmune disease. And we know that that's not true. So again, if you've gone to a regular doctor and they've told you nutrition has nothing to do with your illness, and they don't have a delineation or an additional postgraduate training that's extensive, then you know that advice is coming from a place of ignorance. And this is, again, this is what makes me angry. It's one thing to say, look, I really don't know. Why don't we send you to a nutritionist who maybe can help you with the nutritional correlation between autoimmune disease, versus saying, no, it has nothing to do with diet. Like, that is a very, very big difference in two outcomes. So again, doctors knowing more about nutrition, that's a myth. And so if you're trying to rely on your doctor for good nutritional information, they have no training additionally outside of their graduate medical school, then you probably already know more about nutrition than they do. Let's talk about myth number 3. Myth number 3 is vegetable oil. And what I mean by that is vegetable oil is even a vegetable, right? Vegetable oil is really not a vegetable typically, but I'm going to go deeper than that. Vegetable oil is not a vegetable. Vegetable oil is generally derived from corn or soy. So when you see vegetable oil on a product or a package, you can pretty much guarantee that you're getting genetically modified corn or soybean oil, neither of which are vegetables. Corn is a grain and soy is a legume. So, neither are really truly vegetables, but it sounds healthy and it gives a healthy connotation to say vegetable oil. Now, one of the problems with these vegetable oils is they're super high in omega-6. And if you've read No Grain, No Pain, you know that the omega-6, omega-3 fatty acid balance or ratio is very, very important for modulating inflammation and pain. And if you eat or consume high levels of vegetable oil, and this includes seed oils, like, for example, rapeseed or canola oil, which is another we could add to this list. So we'll just put canola right here. Canola oil they call it oftentimes organic. And again, it's kind of confusing because how can canola oil be organic when rapeseed itself, which is what canola is, it's genetically modified rapeseed. How can you call something that is genetically modified in its origin organic? It doesn't make sense. But canola oil or other vegetable oils are extremely high in omega-6 fatty acids. And so if you're using them in salad dressings, if you're using them in foods, then what ends up happening is you throw this omega-6, omega-3 balance off. And when you throw that balance off, it really can create an increased risk for inflammatory disorders like heart disease, like cancer, and other chronic inflammatory problems. So if you're consuming high quantities of vegetable oil because you've heard that it was a vegetable and that it's healthy, and like this, to me, I don't even know how it makes the list, because at this point, I would hope at this day and age, all of you really know this, but I had to put it on the list because it's still one of those things that's so common that's on those food labels is vegetable oil. They still use that as a tool to make or to trick people into thinking that it's healthy. Okay, myth number 4. This one shouldn't be on the list either, but again, it's such a common thing to hear, and I still hear it almost on a daily basis in my practice. Eggs are bad. Eggs are bad for you because they're high in cholesterol. Now, if you want to do a really deep dive, we could do an entire show, and as a matter of fact, I have done entire shows on the cholesterol myth, and I would encourage you, because we're not going to do a deep dive tonight on that. If this is the first time that you're hearing me talk about cholesterol being elevated is a myth, it doesn't really contribute to heart disease unless you have something called hyperlipoproteinemia, which is a genetic form of familial hypercholesterolemia. Cholesterol really doesn't increase your risk for any disease. And because eggs are higher in cholesterol, they've been demonized for decades, since the early 80s, they've been demonized. But eggs are actually one of the best sources of biologically high-value protein. Now, if you're following a vegetarian diet, and part of a vegetarian diet, some vegetarians do eat eggs. It's a great source of protein in a vegetarian diet, where you're going to get a source of protein that's complete, meaning it has all of the essential amino acids within it in a ratio that is going to help your body heal and repair and maintain muscle mass and maintain adequate protein stature. So eggs are an excellent source of protein. As a matter of fact, they're the most highly biologically valued protein above any other form of protein that we could use. So if you're looking at how can you increase the protein in your diet, and you're looking for a good way to do that, eggs are a great way to do that. And don't throw away the yolk where the cholesterol is. Cholesterol is good for you. Remember, Women, cholesterol is a precursor. It helps you make estrogen and progesterone. Men, cholesterol helps you produce testosterone. Also remember that yolk is very rich in B vitamins and rich in a substance called choline, which is very, very important for long-term memory. Remember, there's a lot of new research coming out that shows that not having adequate cholesterol actually increases your risk for dementia, actually increases your risk for hormone deficiencies and hormone imbalances. So we don't want to go crazy on cutting all the eggs out of our diet because somewhere along the line, cholesterol was demonized incorrectly. So eggs are great for you. Eat them. And yes, you can eat them every day. That's, something else. If you want to have 2 or 3 eggs a day, go for it. It's not really going to create a heart disease increase as a result of elevating your cholesterol. So eggs are good for you. Let's bust that myth. Okay, so number 5, we're running out of room. We're going to come up higher here. So the number 5 on the list is eating too much protein causes kidney damage. This is a big one because right now a lot of you are following the ketogenic diet and or the GLETO diet, the gluten-free keto diet. And this is one of those circulating myths that's going around right now, that too much protein causes kidney damage or kidney disease. Now, this is not true at all. What I will disclaimer this, though, by saying if you have pre-existing kidney disease, meaning if your kidneys are if your kidneys are failing, okay, then you can overdo protein and you can put more pressure on those failing kidneys. But protein in and of itself, even at higher doses, does not cause kidney failure. It's just that we have to sometimes be careful with how much protein somebody who has pre-existing kidney failure eats. But protein itself doesn't cause kidney failure. So if you don't have kidney failure, but your doctor's telling you don't eat too much protein because you're going to cause that, you can understand right now that's not true. How much protein is enough protein is a greater degree of the question, because that answer differs from one person to the next. Like protein levels or protein requirements to sustain what you currently have. Most science says that you need about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So to get kilograms of body weight, you divide your weight. If you're in US, you divide your weight. If it's in pounds, divide that by 2.2, and that's going to give you kilograms of body weight, and you multiply that times 0.8. That is kind of the bare minimum requirement for protein on a daily basis to maintain your existing muscle mass without a major problem. Now, if you got a cold or a flu, if you are trying to work out or lift weights to build new muscle, if you have a chronic disease of inflammation, this won't cut it. This 0.8 grams is not going to cut it. You're going to actually become protein deficit. You're going to start losing your hair. Your skin's going to start drying out. Your muscle's going to start wasting away. If you've got autoimmune disease, you're going to use that protein to try to produce antibodies to fight whatever it is in your environment that's creating or triggering that autoimmune process. So, this is a level where a lot of people are riding at this, somewhere around this neighborhood. And again, for a day-to-day healthy person, this would be probably adequate to maintain unless you're working out aggressively. Then at 0.8 grams per gram or 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram body weight is not enough. So really, if you're working out aggressively, you've got to really push it more along the lines of, 1.5, 1.6. kind of as a place to increase that level of protein to try to build muscle mass or to try to build lean mass. This quantity won't cut it if you're adding a workout routine. So again, the myth here is that too much protein overall would cause a kidney problem. I didn't write that in. We'll just put disease underneath kidney. It doesn't. And if you're working out aggressively, you should probably be more like 1.5 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And if you have an autoimmune disease, this is also kind of a good starting point as well. So too much protein is very much a debatable thing. Most of you are not going to get too much protein, even if you were at 100 plus grams of protein per day. You're probably not going to get too much if you're struggling or combating with an inflammatory autoimmune problem or with a chronic inflammatory disease like a cancer or a heart disease or something along those lines. So part of it is where that protein comes from, and that's just another myth, right? Is that a lot of doctors will say, hey, don't get too much animal meat because that protein contains too much cholesterol, right? Like the eggs. And so that's going to increase your risk for heart disease. And that's not really true either. again, animal fat doesn't necessarily increase your risk for the development of heart disease. And this has actually been quite well studied, and virtually it's one of those longest lasting perpetuating myths in nutrition today, is that, again, too much animal protein is going to somehow increase your risk for the development of major diseases. We absolutely know that that's not true. Diet is very dependent upon the unique individual. We cannot generalize that too much protein causes cancer in everyone. We cannot generalize that not enough protein causes problems for everyone. We have to take everyone's diet as a unique individual with their own unique biochemistry. But too much protein, as a general rule of thumb, is not causing or not a cause of kidney failure or kidney disease. Okay, myth number 6. Those of you, again, have been following me for any length of time should know this, that grain is not healthy. And what do I mean? Let's kind of delineate what I mean by that, because many of you say, well, what about whole grain? Well, what about heirloom grains? What about organic grains? The general rule of thumb, grain is not a healthy staple food, in my experience, for anyone's diet. And that goes for anyone who is struggling with an autoimmune problem. I've been in practice now for almost 20 years, and I've not yet seen a case where grain wasn't playing a major role in the contribution to that inflammatory illness, to that autoimmune process. So grain is not a healthy staple in the diet. But there's another myth that goes along with that, which is that grain causes malnutrition. Like, this is the circulating myth today, because there's a new term. Again, I'm going to come back to this. So number 2, doctors know more about nutrition than you do, which again is not true. But there's a new term that the undereducated have created in order to make you feel bad about caring enough about your own nutrition. And that new term that was created is called orthorexia. Now, orthorexia, in my opinion, is BS. Orthorexia refers to that you're too concerned about your diet and it's become a problem, and now you're ill with a psychological illness. So this is a psychological illness where you're too concerned about what you put in your body. To me, the number one thing that you could be concerned about, that you have control over, is what you put in your body. So calling that or labeling that as a neurotic disorder, orthorexia, to me is kind of one of the things that I will say, it's the death throes of modern medicine. They're trying so hard to make you think that what you eat is not important, that they're creating disease terms out of that. And so going back to this, so this orthorexia is kind of plays into this, because a lot of doctors are saying that a gluten-free diet causes malnutrition because of certain vitamins or certain minerals that you might not get if you're not eating whole grains. In essence, what they're saying is that whole grains are rich in B vitamins, whole grains are rich in certain minerals, and if you go on a gluten-free diet and you're not getting those whole grains, you're not going to get those nutrients, when in fact, there's not a single shred of scientific evidence that proves that a gluten-free diet causes malnutrition. Now, what there is there's evidence that shows that a highly processed diet that's not really gluten-free, but it's full of other grains like rice and corn, that's not nourishing. Those foods aren't nourishing. So of course, that's going to cause malnutrition because you're eating foods that are malnourishing. But it's not the gluten-free diet per se that causes the malnutrition. The gluten-free diet itself can be very healthy if done in the right way. Fresh vegetables, nuts, meats, fruit, those are all grain-free components with lots of nutritional density. Organ meats, very, very nutritionally dense, will not cause malnutrition. As a matter of fact, I've seen just the opposite in my career, is that a gluten-full diet causes malnutrition in a very, very big way. We see the average person with a gluten sensitivity issue have at least 5 deficiencies, 5 nutritional deficiencies out of 40 essential nutrients. When we test, they generally on average have at least 5, whereas people who follow a truly grain-free, gluten-free diet generally have less than 1. So we're looking at 1 or less over time, nutritional deficit, and that's actually objectifying and measuring it. So, and I'll publish that data one of these days, but the gluten-free diet does not cause malnutrition. So if you've been told that by one of your docs, ignore it. It's bogus. It's not true, and it has no validity or no real fundamental backing in science. It's just again, going back to this, your doctor probably knows everything they know about nutrition based on the same commercials on TV that you're exposed to. So if you think about that, that's kind of scary, right? In that if commercial influence is where most people learn about their nutrition, commercial influence, like if you're old and you're losing weight, drink Pedia Boost or Ensure, like these, again, high fructose corn syrup drinks. And that if you're young and you're not gaining weight, drink things like Pediasure. Like these are the same nutritional messages that you're hearing. And I've seen a number of cases, if you remember, even if we go back and pull a specific example from the history, where pediatricians were recommending formulas instead of breastfeeding. They were recommending formula over breastfeeding, right? And created a generation of kids that were omega-3 fatty acid deficient. And many of them were damaged and injured as a result of this, because low level of omega-3 during brain development years can create retardation. And so I would say the advice based on the lack of nutrition, but trusting that the commercial interest was giving nutritional information to your doctor, the same information that you already hear and see in commercials, not a good mix. Okay, so grain is not healthy for the vast majority of people with autoimmune disease. Now, some would argue, what about for other people that don't have autoimmune disease? I think we could have some really sound scientific debate on, some aspects of grain being very poorly healthy and other aspects of grain having the possibility for consumption, but not for somebody who's gluten sensitive. So if you're gluten sensitive, this argument has no merit. If you're gluten sensitive, grain's not healthy, period. And also grain won't cause malnutrition. Okay. So let's dive into the last one. Let me make some room on the board here. Myth number 7. I promised we'd get to this one at the very end here. And so this is the weight loss myth. And so I need a little room because I'm going to teach you some things that you need to understand. The weight loss myth is that calories in equals calories out, meaning if you eat more calories than what you expend, you will gain weight. If you eat less calories than what you expend, you will lose weight. This is the calorie theory of weight loss. So we got to look and understand first and foremost, calories in equals calories out. So this is a myth. Calories in is not equal calories out. You have to first understand what a calorie is. A calorie comes from kind of a scientific observation that when you put food in an airtight box and burn it and then measure the heat that burning of that food generates, that heat is measured as a calorie. And so when you see something, for example, that contains 10 calories, it's based on the quantity of heat that it generates when you burn it. So a calorie, your body is not an airtight box, and metabolism is much more complicated than calories in and calories out. And here's why. Not all calories are created equally. 1 gram of sugar equals 4 calories. And then in that 4 calories from that gram of sugar, there's no vitamins, there's no minerals. Your body's going to actually steal from its own vitamin and mineral storehouse, right, to be able to process that calorie. Whereas if you ate a similar calorie that had vitamins and minerals in it, you wouldn't run into the problem of having to steal from yourself. So an empty calorie is definitely not the same thing. And an empty calorie in equals an empty calorie out. It doesn't hold true to this whole metabolic theory of weight loss. So counting calories, although it can work if the calories that you're counting don't come from processed empty calories, there is an importance of knowing calories in and calories out for weight loss. If you're doing like a macronutrient program or you're counting your macros and you're just trying to kind of get an idea for how many calories you should eat versus how many calories you're burning in a day, whether you're trying to gain weight or whether you're trying to lose weight, because then at least you have some type of objective basis for either increasing them or decreasing them based on how your body is reacting or responding. But a calorie in is not a calorie out. And part of that has to do with the hormonal effect of food. And the other part of it has to do with the caloric / nutrient density of food. So where calories cease to be calories is when is when we don't take these examples into effect. So let me give you an example, and I'm going to use gluten as an example. Gluten, from a food perspective, if a person's gluten sensitive, gluten can cause disruption. And so it's been shown to disrupt. There have been a number of studies that show that gluten can damage the thyroid. And remember, the thyroid is the organ or the gland in your neck that produces thyroid hormone. And thyroid hormone sets your metabolism. Your metabolism is how well your body builds and breaks down, right? So breakdown being weight loss, building being weight gain, metabolic function, anabolic or anabolic function and catabolic function. Anabolic plus catabolic equals metabolic. So your thyroid is what is like the master gland in control of that. And so there's a lot of research showing that the hormonal effect of eating the wrong food, in this case, again, I'm giving you the example of gluten. If you're gluten sensitive and you consume gluten and it damages your thyroid, it's going to disrupt your metabolism. And in most cases, it's going to slow it down. There are some cases like in Graves' disease where it actually speeds it up and causes a hyperthyroidism. But for most people, it's going to slow it down, especially in females. This is a very, very common disease that impacts females. So we know that, and again, an effect of a food can be hormonal, meaning having an effect on how your body produces hormones. We also know the same thing can happen with estrogen. There are research studies that show gluten can impact estrogen, that it can impact prolactin, which is another hormone, that it can impact cortisol. Now, this is a big one. And for most inflammatory foods, so if we're talking about hormonal effect of food, really it's the inflammatory effect that food can have. Because when food is causing inflammation, what's going to happen is it's going to drive up cortisol. It's going to increase your cortisol. Now, cortisol will travel to your liver, and it's going to have your liver is then going to dump sugar into your bloodstream. Okay, so when you eat foods that are highly inflammatory, causing you to make more cortisol on average on a daily basis, that cortisol is going to tell your liver to let go of sugar, so the stored sugar in your liver. So it's like a constant, it's like you're sipping on soda all day long as that cortisol level is elevated. Now, one of the other functions, negative functions of cortisol, is that it reduces muscle mass. And when you have less muscle mass, that's going to have an impact. It's going to slow down your metabolism. Remember, the thyroid sets the pace for your metabolism, but the quantity of muscle that you have helps with that. And this is why people that have more muscle mass have a harder time gaining fat, because their muscle mass is burning energy at rest. They're burning more energy at rest than a person who has low muscle mass. So this is the muscle mass effect on metabolism is stripped away with cortisol. This is why people that go on long-term steroids, so people with asthma, for example, or people that have had multiple steroid injections, or people who take an oral steroid for pain, for chronic pain scenarios, their muscle mass slowly is lost. And this is why these drugs can contribute to diabetes, because they eat away the muscle, leading to also elevations in blood sugar. And so now what you have is a weakened muscle with too much blood sugar. And remember, muscle mass also sets the sensitivity to insulin. So the quantity of muscle that you have, there's a direct reflection between the quantity of muscle you have and the insulin sensitivity, how sensitive the insulin you produce works. And so lower muscle mass means lower insulin sensitivity. And if cortisol is causing lower mass, lower insulin sensitivity, but also increasing your bloodstream sugar, then what ends up happening as an outcome is diabetes. So again, this can happen through the hormonal effect of food. If the foods that you're eating on a regular daily basis are highly inflammatory, I can promise you that this cascade is working its way insidiously through your body. And it may take 10, 15, 20 years for it to manifest as an actual full-blown blood sugar problem that a doctor might diagnose as diabetes. This is one of the biggest problems with food, is the hormonal effect through the inflammatory effect. So again, this can happen very commonly. It happens with gluten. It can also happen with highly processed food. It can happen with sugar. It can happen with any food that you might be allergic to. So many of you might have delayed hypersensitivities to different foods where you don't eat it, and we're not talking about the anaphylactic shock type of reaction for food allergy. We're talking about the low grade kind of slow poison food reaction, right? So it's just like you don't eat a piece of gluten and tomorrow you're dead. It's that it kills you kind of in a more slow fashion. And diabetes is one outcome of how gluten can create a highly inflammatory issue through the elevation of cortisol. But again, the thyroid can also slow down and create thyroid issues. And other foods can do this too. A lot of it depends on who you are. Again, this goes back to there's not one right diet for everyone. There's a biochemical individuality that you all have. And if you're not honoring your body, if you're putting in food as a message, remember that's what it is. Food is a message to your body. It's a message to help your body heal, repair, maintain, and grow. And if you're putting in a message that says, no, we don't want you to do any of those things. Instead, what we really want to do is disrupt, create inflammation, and break things down, then over time, that food acts as a slow poison, leading to this type of cascade. So going back to what this myth was all about in the first place, is the calorie is not a calorie, because the quality of the food matters, and where the food comes from matters, and what you're allergic to or not allergic to matters, and whether it's an empty calorie or not matters. So all of those things matter. And if you're just counting calories to try to lose weight, or if you're just counting calories to try to gain weight, or if you're just going through like Weight Watchers or using a point system or something like Jenny Craig where they're delivering meals to you on a weekly basis, but they're delivering highly inflammatory foods for you, it doesn't matter how much you count, this will be the outcome. And when that's the outcome, you lose. So that's myth number 7. Now I'm going to open the floor for any questions that you guys or gals might have. So looks like Hector says, hey, Doc, any thoughts on reversing ankylosing spondylitis? Well, that's kind of an out of the nowhere type question, Hector. But yeah, lots of thoughts on reversing ankylosing spondylitis. And the first one I would say is read No Grain, No Pain and apply the diet. If you read and apply the diet, you'll have a profound impact on the progression of your illness. Profound. I've seen a number of cases of AS actually go into remission through diet change. Let's see. Happy Monday, Renee. What's a better method for vitamin D3 lower doses, 5,000 every few days or 1,000 every day? Also, how long does it take yeast to leave your system if you have an overgrowth? So let's tackle question number 1 first. A better method for vitamin D3 lower doses. Better method, well, it depends on how low your vitamin D is. So if you're going to be taking vitamin D on a daily basis, the best way is to have your doctor measure it for you. We're looking at 25 OHD being the proper test to really look at this. 25 OHD, and we want a level somewhere, ideally, my advice is somewhere between 70 and 100. Now, the range for most lab tests is 20 to 100. I like to see it above, somewhere between 70 and 100, especially if you've got a history of autoimmunity. And so that being the case, if it's, let's just say your level's at 20, to get it to go from 20 to 70, 5,000 won't do that. 5,000 units a day or every few days won't do that. 1,000 units a day won't do that. If you want to get it from 20 to 70, we're talking probably 8 to 10,000 units a day for several months to get it to make that kind of jump. Otherwise, you're just spitting on a forest fire. That generally that quantity is usually it's just not enough to get that level elevated enough. So if you're taking 5,000 units, it's a very safe thing to do, by the way, to take 5,000 units per day. 1,000 units a day is not going to do much for the average adult person. So not something I'd typically recommend if you're trying to be effective. Let's see. Ann wants to know, as a woman over 40, how do I get more testosterone to assist with keeping muscle growth? Heard recently how important testosterone is for women as well. Is this correct? Yeah, testosterone is very important, although less important for women than men. But how do you maintain adequate testosterone levels? The number one thing that you can do, male or female, is to lift weights. So if you want to increase your testosterone, increase the weight. Now, you don't have to get super heavy. You don't have to, try to, deadlift 300 pounds or, bench press 250 pounds or anything like that. You want to make sure you're doing weight-bearing activity very consistently. I would advise the average person who's not in great physical shape to start off with, something like 4 times a week where you're doing 4 to 10 minute high intensity repetitious exercises using only body weight. So not using heavy weight, but using body weight. Things like push-ups, pull-ups, squats, lunges, plank holds, jump ropes, short distance sprinting. Like, these are just real simple and really effective ways to tell your body that you need your muscle to start growing. And when you do that, that's going to increase your testosterone production. Now, it's also important to understand that testosterone requires zinc. If you're zinc deficient, it will be very, very hard for you to produce adequate levels of testosterone. So ask your doctor to measure your zinc levels, because zinc plays a central, crucial role in how you're able and capable of producing testosterone. And as I said earlier, I erased it already, but eggs are a form of dietary cholesterol, and we said that they were not bad for you. And one of the things I mentioned there is that cholesterol was a precursor, or is a precursor. It's the mother hormone. It helps you make testosterone. So sometimes if you're having your cholesterol suppressed either through diet or through medication manipulation, you could actually be lowering your testosterone. So those would all be kind of general things to consider. Ann, let's see here. What's my take on fulvic acid? Depends. I mean, fulvic acid, I have some supplements that contain fulvic acid, certain minerals and other things. I'm not opposed to fulvic acid, but, maybe ask me more specifically, for what reasons or for what purpose. Let's see. Trish says, still detoxifying from gluten, 5 weeks now. Will it ever end? Yes, it will end. And you may not just be detoxifying from gluten, Trish. I don't know if you're under the supervision or if anybody's working with you or guiding you through that process. Feel free to join our support group on Facebook. It's the Dr. Osborne Support Community. If you just type that into your Facebook search, you can pull that up, and we have a couple thousand people in that group, kind of helping each other along as a community. It might be a good way for you to get some feedback from others who are struggling or going through the same type of issue. But yes, it does end. But again, if you get beyond 8 weeks, there's something missing. There's something you're doing either wrong or something that you're missing, and that you may need additional information. Okay. Let's see here. Love it. You're welcome, Tamara. Tamara says, thanks from Utah. Let's see. Ruth, 7 weeks. And we have more training than the typical doctor. Thank you. Yeah, so if you're 7 weeks into the Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain Show, I promise you those 7 hours will be far more valuable and superior than any training that's being taught in medical school today. Let's see here. Are eggs inflammatory? They can be for some people. I mean, egg is one of the top 8 allergens. So again, when I said earlier that eggs are not bad because of the cholesterol, it doesn't mean that a person can't be allergic to them. Any person can be allergic to any food. And that, again, that depends on the individual nature of the person. So eggs can be inflammatory for some. That's why many diets, including my no grain, no pain phase 2 diet, is eliminating that aspect of egg, or can eliminate that aspect of egg, because for some people with autoimmune disease, egg can be a trigger. It's not always the case, though. In my experience, it's maybe the case, I'd say probably less than 20% of the time. So, but you can have an allergy to egg, and that's not uncommon. Let's see. Just took a course on this. Let's see. Oh, fibroids, Teresa. So fibroid, if you've got a fibroid, depending on where the fibroid is, if it's a uterine fibroid or whether or not it's fibrocystic breast tissue, it's oftentimes associated with gluten sensitivity, Teresa. So again, if you haven't gone grain-free, that would be a really good place to just begin the process of diet change to see if you found any improvement. I've seen a number of people over the years who changed their diet and changed the outlook on the fibroid itself. Let's see. What about an alkaline diet? What about an alkaline diet, Stacy? More specificity for me. An alkaline diet for what? Let's see. What about the China study by Colin Campbell, where he talks about the protein from vegetables is better in our bodies than animal protein, and animal protein increases cancer risk? So there's some very loose studies that have been done. The China study is more, in my opinion, it's not a comprehensive study. It's a highly opinionated book. There are actually a couple great authors who've debunked the China study. You can look up debunk the China study myth, and you can find out more in detail information. But some of the circulating rumors are that the protein in animal products can create a byproduct in the colon that increases the risk for certain types of cancers. And look, these studies are far from over and far from done. There are a couple of cultures where we can really pull knowledge and information from. And one is for example, the Alaskan Inuit culture, who eats predominantly whale fat as part of their diet, as part of their staple food, and they have very low incidence of any type of cancer. So we can't really make the claim that animal foods or animal products increase the risk in cancer for everyone who's in existence. And we also can't make the claim that plant-based proteins are somehow superior to animal proteins, especially when you consider that many of the plant-based proteins, for example, like soy, are genetically modified. Many of, like your soy contains, for men, high levels of estrogen. It would probably be a poorer choice for a lot of men to choose textured vegetable protein supplements and soy-based protein powders as a means to get the vast majority of their protein. It just, again, that's not a really. I know the China study is a really popular book. I don't want to say anything bad about T. Colin Campbell. I'm sure he's got his own experiences and his own opinions. But in my experience, not everybody's suited for a vegetarian diet, and we can't generalize that a vegetarian diet is somehow superior over a meat-based diet. None of that's been proven in any research we'll just say that we could say any research that's been done that's been definitive. Most of it's done in really, most of the writing is done in like either really small scale trials that can't be replicated in the long term, or it's been done where somebody took a liberty with the information that was being published, too great of a liberty. Okay, let's see. Best natural remedy from itchiness to mold exposure at work until I can find a new job. Try Histacyst, Elaine. If you're looking for a natural remedy for itching, Histacyst. It's a mixture of many different things. The two of the main ingredients are quercetin and vitamin C, but it's a great natural mast cell stabilizer. So the ingredients in it help stabilize the cell called a mast cell, which is what releases histamine and then causes a lot of that itching. Let's see, with scleroderma affecting collagen, the face and lips, should it cause harmful to use collagen base for creams? I think what you're asking is collagen base in a cream harmful to somebody with scleroderma? And I'd say probably not something I would be really super concerned with, David. Okay. Could anyone who is gluten sensitive develop thyroiditis, or do you have to have a genetic predisposition first? So Rita, gluten sensitivity is a genetic predisposition. It's not a disease. A lot of people think gluten sensitivity is an allergy or some type of disease. Gluten sensitivity is a genetic predisposition. If you haven't been genetically tested, go visit glutenfreesociety.org. They've got a big tab at the main menu that says genetic testing. Get genetically tested. Make sure that going gluten-free is the right move for you. It's not the right move necessarily for everyone, but it might be the right move for you. So when you think about gluten sensitivity, don't think of it as a disease. Think of it as, if you're genetically gluten sensitive, if you have those predisposition genes and you subject those genes to gluten, then the outcome of that is going to be that your body's going to make inflammation against it. And that inflammation creates collateral damage that can lead to a host of over 100 different forms of illness. Celiac is just one of them. I mean, celiac gets a lot of the credit with gluten sensitivity. This is simply because, we discovered celiac disease as an autoimmune disease. We discovered that gluten caused it in the early 1950s. And so it just got the most press and still gets the most press today. But there's a term that many doctors and researchers use. A term is non-celiac gluten sensitivity. It's because many people with gluten sensitivity never develop celiac disease, but develop neuropathy or develop liver damage or develop a host or a battery of different types of illnesses that have nothing to do with their gut. And so again, you have to understand that gluten sensitivity is not a disease. It's a state of genetics. Get genetically tested if you really want to understand whether or not going gluten-free is the right move for you. Okay, let's see. A lot of you are loving eggs, so that's good. So maybe I can let you eat. The knowledge tonight helps you eat eggs with less guilt or less stress on your conscience. What are my thoughts on the ketogenic and the Mediterranean diet? Look, ketogenic diet, Matt, is it's a great diet for anyone with epileptic seizure disorder. It's a great diet for somebody with cancer. It can be a great diet for somebody who's struggling with carbohydrate toxicity. A lot of people respond really well to a keto diet more because they're going grain-free than because they're actually improving their fat count. But ketogenic diets, again, they're effective, but I don't think that long-term, I don't think they're balanced. Just like long-term, I don't think a low-fat diet is balanced. And I think if you really want to look at Mother Nature and how everything has been designed, it's designed to work in balance and harmony. I'm more a fan of a balanced diet. So some people go ketogenic, in the short term, and they lose weight and they feel better. They have more energy. And what I have seen over the number of years is a lot of people go keto and then they start gravitating back to kind of this general rule of thirds, which is, and my graph is not perfect, so don't make fun of it. Imagine your diet being basically an equal distribution of carbs, fats, and proteins. A third, if you will, the rule of thirds, a third carb, a third fat, a third protein. This would be balanced. Now, I'm not saying get out the scale and weigh everything every day. Although I am saying that too, because if you've never done that, it's a very enlightening exercise to perform with yourself. But most people ketogenic, they're falling like 70 to 90% fat, right? And then the rest mop up with carb and protein. Or most Americans on average are like 70+% carbohydrate and then low protein, low fat. So both diets, in my opinion, aren't great for anybody long term. So ketogenic diet, again, therapeutically for cancer, very good choice. Therapeutically for epileptic seizure disorder, very good choice. Therapeutically for somebody with carbohydrate toxicity who's been following a standard American diet for years and they're trying to kind of move and shift their body's ability to metabolize fat a little bit better, great choice in the short term. But forever, no, I don't think you stay in ketosis forever. I don't think that's the smartest move, for the average person. That's my opinion. That's my clinical experience. And certainly there are people out there that will disagree with that and that will argue with that. But that's kind of my short take on it. And if you want to watch more about the keto diet and you want to dive in a little bit more aggressively to keto, I did an entire show on the ketogenic diet. And you can learn that. And it's called the Keto Crash Course. And you can pull that up in my archives on YouTube. Let's see here. I am gluten sensitive and non-celiac, but I tolerate oats. Is that okay? Well, Daniela, do you have a misunderstanding of gluten sensitivity? If you're gluten sensitive, you don't really tolerate oats. You might not react to them immediately. You might not have an overt reaction, but oats have a form of gluten in them called avenin. There's no such thing as a gluten-free oat. And so if you're really, truly gluten sensitive, in my opinion, you shouldn't be eating oats. No, to my knowledge, there's no genetic testing for casein allergy, but there's a lot of testing for casein allergy that is not genetic that is very easy to get access to. If gluten sensitivity to gluten occurs because of a reaction to antibiotics, is that reversible? So Hollywood, if gluten sensitivity occurs because of antibiotics, so let's think of it gluten sensitivity doesn't occur because of antibiotics. Gluten sensitivity symptoms may get triggered because of a round of antibiotics, but a person is or isn't gluten sensitive. They either have, again, you either have the genetic predisposition or you don't. What happens to some people is they have the genetic predisposition and then they have a negative reaction to antibiotics, and then the symptoms of gluten sensitivity come crashing in. And so is that reversible? Yeah, after overcoming the damage that the antibiotics can do. A lot of people overdo the antibiotics in their life, but the damage is still reversible. And I have a really good video on do antibiotics cause celiac disease. If you want to dive into some more of the research behind that, you can watch that and get more information. Let's see here. Is it a myth that genetic gluten sensitivity is not an autoimmune condition? No, again, genetic gluten sensitivity is not a disease. It's a state of genetics. So this is why it's so important to get tested. So many people go gluten-free and they feel better, but they don't know why. They think they're gluten sensitive. So many people go keto, and because keto is gluten-free, they feel better, and they think they feel better because of keto, but they may actually feel better because they're going gluten-free. So again, knowledge is power. Knowing whether or not staying off of gluten indefinitely is the right move for you is where it's at. Like, if you really want to get customized with your diet, don't mess around. Don't guess around about whether or not going gluten-free is a good move. Just get tested, get it done. We also have a gluten quiz you can take if you want to take a quiz. But again, a quiz, it's about 33 questions. And if you answer, enough of them, with the right answers, then you will kind of try to estimate for you. But, a quiz is no substitute for genetic testing. Let's see. Yeah, I can't get past 2.5 weeks. Some of you said the gluten-free diet can't get past 2.5 weeks. Yeah, I mean, this is why I think genetic testing, people should do it, because it can give you the gumption. It can give you the not knowing whether or not you need to change your diet. First of all, understand this. The gluten-free diet is a 12-week learning curve minimum. Like, it's going to take you 12 weeks just to figure it out, right? And this is why most people fail at it, because they go 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks into the diet and they really don't do it right because they haven't gotten through the learning curve yet. And when they're not feeling fully better, they kind of quit. And then they go out and say, oh, the diet didn't work for me. I'm not gluten sensitive. No, get tested. And then if you need to commit to the diet, then commit to the 12-week learning curve, commit to the change, because it is not a temporary change. It is a lifelong change that you'll need to make in order to maximize your health. Okay, let's see here. Let's see. Tiffany's question. Husband has high triglycerides and high LDL. How do we know if this is related to blood sugar, possibly from high LPS from root canal? Well, first questions first, Tiffany. Looking at his diet would be the first thing to do, because triglycerides are oftentimes high as a result of diet. They're a lot less often high as a result of LPS. Generally, LPS from a root canal is not the cause of high triglycerides. I would say, in my experience, it's a much more rare scenario than the diet being the culprit. But yeah, get with a good functional doc and get some testing done, and that's how you're really going to get to the root of it. Okay, Brigitte. Hi, Dr. Osborne. Could too little protein in the diet trigger insomnia? Yes, it can. I like that question. And one of the reasons why is part of how we sleep is through neurotransmitters or neurochemicals, right? Neurochemicals like dopamine and serotonin and melatonin. And these neurochemicals are made from amino acids and vitamins and minerals. So what happens, your body biochemically will take certain amino acids, put them together in long chains under the direction of vitamins and minerals, what are called cofactors. And if you aren't sleeping adequately because you don't, for example, have adequate melatonin, or you don't produce adequate serotonin to convert to melatonin, low level of protein in the diet, if your tryptophan level is too low, it can create anxiety at night. It can create trouble sleeping at night. So simply put, it can absolutely trigger it. And what I gave you was just a few different examples. Linda wants to know, is it possible to have a reversed issue with omega-3, 6, too much 3 and not enough 6? It's possible, but not likely. Not likely really at all in today's world. Very, very difficult to get it to go to that level. Let's see here. What's next here? Big question. What contributes to heart disease and cancer? The number one thing, June, is inflammation. Bigger question is what causes the inflammation. There's 4 primary choices you make every day that will cause inflammation. Biggest one is food, chemical exposure, nutritional balance, and whether or not you have nutritional deficits. These are like 4 biochemical triggers, and then microbial or infectious problems that that you might have. Now, there are other choices that you can make, like how much sleep you get and whether you exercise, whether you get sunshine, whether you're drinking clean water, breathing clean air. Like those are also things that might contribute to inflammation. So the bigger question is, what are you doing in your current day-to-day life that's either contributing to aggressive inflammation or creating a normalized state in your body and creating a state where your body has the capacity to heal and repair itself? Because some inflammation is good, but it's the chronic abundance of inflammation that creates those illnesses. I don't understand your question, Sharon. The best gluten-free caloric intake. Not sure I understand what you mean by that. Don't know, Virginia. If you went grain-free for 2 months and felt no different than when you were gluten-free, does that mean you're not gluten sensitive? No, it doesn't mean a whole lot at all, because it takes 2 months just to get the gluten out of your system. So if you did it for, I don't know what 2+ months is, but I'd say you got to be at least 6 months out before you can make that kind of determination, and really get tested. If you're not sure, get tested. All righty, let's see here. I like this. So on that note, Marie says, I had the genetic testing done, ordered from Gluten-Free Society, and positive, and I feel so much better since going gluten and grain-free, and basically saved my life from having an autoimmune disease, ALS, like my mom died from. Thanks for sharing that, Marie. That's powerful. Get tested. Look, get tested. It's not worth letting another 10 or 15 years go by and not knowing, and you're doing all this slow poison damage to your body. You understand that sometimes autoimmune disease, it builds. And because it's such a hard thing to diagnose, remember that doctors today are not really trained in autoimmune disease. It's not a specialty. You have subspecialties like endocrinology and rheumatology for joint-based autoimmune diseases or soft tissue-based autoimmune diseases, but there's no great specialty and no great overlap amongst the specialties. And this is why the average person with autoimmune disease takes 35+ years to get a diagnosis. So, if gluten is the #1 factor involved in the causation of autoimmune disease in the research, and we know that it is, that's why I wrote No Grain, No Pain, then get tested. If you've got autoimmune disease and you don't know why, quit jumping around at straws. Get tested and get it done so that you can make a decision about whether or not you need to commit. I know I'm being redundant here, but I think it's that important. Okay, I'm going to take one more question because they just keep coming in, and I don't have time all night to stay on. But let's see. I don't have celiac disease, but I'm gluten sensitive. Is it because I have Hashimoto's? That's what Ina wants to know. It would be more the opposite, Ina. So like what you're asking me is, you don't have celiac disease diagnosed. You are gluten sensitive. Is your gluten sensitivity because of Hashimoto's? No. Is your Hashimoto's possibly because of gluten sensitivity? Yes. Now, are there other triggers and causes for Hashimoto's? Yes. But gluten is a big one. And I think to date, we're going on over 300 peer-reviewed medical studies linking gluten to thyroid conditions. So, it's no longer a guess. It's no longer an esoteric thing. There's enough data in the medical research that justifies that those with Hashimoto's are very likely gluten sensitive. And there's a lot of research showing that gluten-free diets help tremendously with people that have Hashimoto's by reducing their antibody levels and improving their body's capacity to produce their own thyroid hormone and overall their outcome. So, okay. I know that we've got a lot more of you asking questions. I just want to say, look, this is your first time tuning into the Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain Show. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and get notified. We have a show every Monday night at 6 p.m. We're back here, Texas time, Central time. You can also make sure you subscribe to the channel. We put out about a video a day. We try to do about 7 videos a week for your education. And remember, as always, if you haven't already, give me that. Type that in right here. Hashtag save 100 million lives. That's how people find us. Remember, our goal here is to help the more than 100 million chronically sick people who are suffering with autoimmune disease or suspected autoimmune disease find real nutritional answers to their problems and not drug-based solutions. So help me reach more people by sharing this knowledge. If you find it helpful, Keep tuning in. But if we can bring in more people that can find it helpful, even better. We all win that way. So thanks for tuning in and spending your Monday night with me. This is Dr. Osborne wishing you excellent health.